always believed I had my life figured out. My plan was simple: marry a nurse, send her abroad, and join her later for a better life. It was a path that had worked for others, and I was convinced it would work for me too. When I met my wife, everything felt like destiny. We barely knew each other, but I didn't care. She was a nurse, and that was all that mattered. I proposed within a month, eager to lock in the future I had envisioned. I spent every penny I had to process her papers, determined to make our dream a reality. I wasn't rich, but I sacrificed everything to send her to the UK, believing she would build a foundation for us there. But months passed, and my dream began to crack. She never sent anything home, not even a small token of appreciation. Whenever I called, she gave the same excuses. Give me time to settle down properly. Things are not easy yet. At first, I understood. Starting a new life abroad wasn't easy, but as time dragged on, my patience thinned. The weight of her absence and the financial strain of her travel pressed down on me. I was barely surviving, yet the woman I had sacrificed everything for acted as if I didn't exist. And then came the request, a plea to accommodate her friend in our home for just 1 month. That was the moment everything changed. At first, I refused. It felt wrong. Why should I house another woman when my wife wasn't even here? But my wife kept pleading, insisting the lady had nowhere else to go. Please, just 1 month, she begged. Even the lady herself called me, her voice trembling with desperation. Against my better judgment, I gave in. Maybe this was my wife's way of showing appreciation, helping a friend in need. Maybe if I said no, she would see me as selfish, so I agreed. 1 month, that was the deal. But 1 month turned into 2, and she was still here. Her excuses changed. I don't want to live in Lagos anymore. My family is looking for a job for me back home. Every time I asked when she was leaving, she deflected. And slowly, without me even realizing it, things shifted. She started cooking for me, making my meals exactly how I liked them. She cleaned the house, did my laundry, and made me feel less alone. It had been almost a year since my wife left, and this woman, this stranger, was here, present, caring. I didn't plan for it to happen. I didn't expect it. But one night, when the loneliness became unbearable, I let my guard down. It was a mistake, a moment of weakness. That's what I told myself. But the truth, I wanted it. It had been too long since I felt like a husband, too long since I had felt wanted. She didn't push me away. She didn't make me feel guilty. Instead, she pulled me in, her warmth replacing the cold emptiness my wife had left behind. That night, something shifted between us, and from that point on, there was no going back. We fell into a routine that felt dangerously normal, waking up together, eating together, laughing at silly jokes. It was wrong, but it felt right. Then, one day, she sat across from me at the dining table, her face pale, her hands trembling. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. My stomach dropped. My mind screamed, "Pregnant? How?" I knew how, but my brain refused to accept it. My body went cold, my vision blurred. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but no words came out. The air between us turned heavy, suffocating. This wasn't just a mistake anymore. This was permanent. This was a sin that couldn't be undone. Days passed in a blur. I was drowning in panic, trying to figure out what to do. I hadn't told my wife yet. How could I? Maybe if I waited long enough, I could fix this before she found out. Maybe the woman carrying my child would decide to leave. Maybe I could pretend it never happened. But fate had other plans. One evening, my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but when I saw my wife's name, my chest tightened. I hesitated before picking up, my voice strained. "Hello?" There was a pause, and then laughter. Cold, sharp laughter. "Congratulations," she said, her voice dripping with mockery. "I heard you're going to be a father." My breath caught in my throat. She knew. My hands went numb as I struggled to form words, but she didn't give me the chance. "The marriage is over," she continued. You can have her. The phone slipped from my hand. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. This wasn't real. This wasn't happening. I had spent everything on this woman, built my future around her, and now, just like that, she had thrown it all away. A cold chill ran down my spine as I realized the worst part. She didn't sound hurt. She didn't sound heartbroken. She sounded free. Minutes later, another call came in, this time from her father. His voice was sharp, laced with disappointment. "Come and take back your bride price," he said simply, a final blow to my dignity. I sat there staring at the wall, my entire world collapsing around me. My wife had left me. Her father had disowned me, and now I was trapped with a woman carrying my child, a woman I never wanted to love. Days turned to weeks, and the rumors started to spread. At first, I ignored them. People talked exaggerated, twisted stories for entertainment. But then, I heard the same thing from too many mouths to dismiss it. "Your wife is living with another man in the UK?" I laughed when I first heard it. It was impossible. My wife wasn't like that. She was just settling in, trying to make a life for us, right? But doubt gnawed at me, a slow, insidious poison. I called her, my hands shaking, my breath uneven. She answered after several rings, her voice clipped. "Why are you calling me?" I forced the words out. "Tell me it's not true." Silence. My heart stopped. Then, a sigh. "I don't owe you any explanations." I felt the world tilt, my stomach twisting into knots. "So it's true?" My voice cracked. Her response was a dagger to the heart. "It was never going to be you anyway." I sat in silence for what felt like hours. The truth sat in my chest like a stone, heavy, crushing. She had never loved me. I was nothing more than a stepping stone, a means to an end. My sacrifice, my devotion, it had all been for nothing. My wife had used me to get abroad, and the moment she found her way, she discarded me like I was nothing, and now I had nothing. Nothing but a child I never planned for, a life I never wanted, a woman who wasn't my wife but was still carrying my blood, and a rage inside me that I didn't know what to do with. I sat in the darkness of my apartment, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a mountain. I settled down because life got in the way and really everything pressing down on me like a mountain. How had I ended up here? One moment I was a husband with dreams, a man with a future. The next I was discarded, forgotten. My wife, the woman I had sacrificed everything for, had replaced me. Not with time, not with struggle, but with another man, her ex. The realization twisted something inside me, something cold and vicious. The walls of my home felt like they were closing in. This place wasn't a home anymore. It was a graveyard of memories, a prison of regrets. Every corner whispered her name. Every object reminded me of what I had lost. But worst of all, the woman who still lived here, the one carrying my child, was a daily reminder of my failure. I wanted to hate her. I wanted to hate myself. But the truth was, I had no one else left. She moved through the apartment carefully, like she was afraid to disturb me. I didn't speak to her much. Didn't ask how she was feeling. Didn't acknowledge the life growing inside her. How could I? She wasn't supposed to be the mother of my child. She wasn't supposed to be here at all, but one night, she broke the silence. "I know you hate me," she said, her voice quiet. I didn't respond. She exhaled sharply, placing a hesitant hand on her stomach. But this baby didn't ask for any of this. Her words struck something deep inside me. I wanted to snap, to tell her that none of this mattered anymore, but instead I turned my back to her, swallowing the lump in my throat. I was stuck in this nightmare, and there was no waking up from it. Days turned to weeks, and her belly grew, a silent reminder that my life was no longer my own. People whispered when they saw us together. Some pitied me, others laughed behind my back. His wife left him, and another woman took her place. He paid for his wife to leave him. The humiliation was unbearable. Then one day, my phone rang. It was her father. The man who had once blessed our union, now treating me like a stranger. "Come and take back your bride price," he said, his voice sharp. I gripped the phone, my knuckles turning white. "Sir, can't we—" "No," he cut in. "My daughter is no longer your wife." He paused, his voice dropping to something colder. "And from now on, you are no longer welcome in our family." I had lost everything. The rumors reached me before the truth did. My wife had moved in with her ex. The man she had always claimed was nothing, a part of her past. Now he was her future. My mind refused to accept it. She had betrayed me so easily, so cruelly. I called her again, but this time, she didn't answer. I tried for days, but she never picked up. Then, one evening, she finally responded. "What do you want?" Her voice was sharp, impatient, like I was a burden. My throat tightened. Why him? It was a stupid question, but it was the only thing I could ask. She laughed. "Because I was never supposed to be with you." Her words were like a knife twisting into my chest. "You were just convenient." My grip on the phone tightened. "I gave you everything," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "And now you have nothing," she said, and then she hung up. The anger didn't come all at once. It built slowly, creeping into my bones, settling in my chest like fire waiting to burn. She had used me. She had played me for a fool, taken my love, my money, my life, and discarded me like trash. The world had turned me into a joke, a cautionary tale for men who loved too blindly. I wanted revenge. I didn't know how. I didn't know when, but I knew I couldn't let this end like this. She had broken me, and I refused to let her walk away without consequences. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The woman carrying my child wasn't my wife. She wasn't who I had chosen, but she was still here. She still looked at me like I was a man worth something, even when I felt like I was nothing. And one night, when the loneliness became unbearable, I turned to her. She didn't push me away. She let me break in her arms, let me pour my grief into her warmth. And for the first time since my wife left, I didn't feel completely alone. I knew it wasn't love, not yet, but maybe, just maybe, it was something I could hold on to. For now, just as I started to accept my new life, my phone buzzed with a message that shattered everything. An unknown number, one sentence. "She's not who you think she is." My stomach twisted. Who? My ex-wife? The woman carrying my child? Before I could process it, another message followed. "You need to ask her about Enugu." My blood ran cold. The woman living in my house, the one carrying my child, had always claimed she was waiting for a job in Enugu, but something about this felt wrong. I turned to look at her, watching the way she moved in my house so comfortably, too comfortably. What was she hiding? The message haunted me for days. I tried to ignore it, but doubt slithered into my mind, poisoning everything. She had always seemed too eager to stay, too willing to make herself part of my life. I had assumed it was because she had nowhere else to go, but what if it wasn't? I started paying attention. The way she never mentioned her family, never spoke about her past in Enugu, the way she avoided certain topics. And then, one evening when she was in the shower, I did something I never thought I would do. I searched through her phone, and what I found made my blood turn to ice. There were dozens of texts from a contact saved as brother. But as I read through them, my hands began to shake. He's starting to trust me. It won't be long now. I'll let you know when the time is right. He doesn't suspect a thing. My chest tightened. Who was she talking about? Before I could scroll further, a hand grabbed my wrist. I looked up and met her eyes, wide, terrified, and filled with something I hadn't seen before, guilt. Her grip on my wrist tightened, her fingers cold and stiff, like they were holding on to something more than just my hand. A secret, a lie, a plan that was slipping through her fingers. My heart pounded in my ears, my breath shallow. What the hell was this? I looked at her face, at the panic in her eyes, the way her lips trembled like she wanted to say something but couldn't. Who are you really talking to? My voice was low, controlled, but inside I was spiraling. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than any confession ever could. I pulled my hand away from hers and took a step back, my mind racing. Was this a setup? Had I been played? Again? The betrayal of my wife had left me raw, but this? This was something else. This was happening in real time. Her eyes darted to the phone, still in my hand. "Give it back," she whispered, but there was no anger in her voice, just fear, real, trembling fear. And that's when I knew. This wasn't about privacy. This was about survival. She needed to stop me before I saw something worse. I tightened my grip on the phone and turned my back on her, scrolling faster. And then I saw it. A single message time-stamped 3 days ago. The baby isn't his. He's just the easiest target. The ground beneath me vanished. My chest caved in. My breath caught in my throat. Not mine? My vision blurred, my fingers trembling. She took a step toward me, but I held up a hand, stopping her. I couldn't look at her. I couldn't breathe. I had destroyed my life for this woman, and the baby wasn't even mine. A sound left my throat, something between a laugh and a choke. I ran a hand through my hair, gripping my skull like it would stop the storm inside me. How? How had I let this happen again? My wife had abandoned me, betrayed me, ruined me, and now this woman, the woman I had forced myself to accept, had done worse. She reached for me again. "I can explain," she whispered. I looked at her finally. She looked so small, so guilty, but all I saw was a stranger. "Who is he?" My voice came out rough, uneven. She hesitated. "There is no one else," she said quickly, too quickly. "Lies. Everything was lies." I let out a breath. "You need to leave," I said. My voice was deadly calm, but inside I was burning alive. Her face crumbled. "Please, just let me explain." "No." I turned away, staring at the wall, trying to hold on to the last shred of my sanity. "I want you out of my house. Tonight." She left. I don't know where she went, and I didn't care. I sat in the dark, staring at nothing, feeling nothing. There was nothing left inside me to feel. First my wife, now this. I had given everything, and I was left with nothing but shame. I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. My phone buzzed with messages I didn't answer. I was a dead man walking, a shell of what I used to be. I had spent my whole life chasing something that never wanted me back. First, a wife who had used me to escape. Then a woman who had used me to survive, and now I was just a joke. That night, as I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, I made a decision. This wouldn't be my ending. I needed the truth. I needed to find my ex-wife. And I needed to know if this had all been planned from the start. I booked a flight to the UK without thinking, without planning. It was reckless, stupid, dangerous, but I didn't care. I had nothing left to lose. My ex-wife had blocked me everywhere, but she couldn't hide forever. The moment I landed, I felt it. This wasn't my place. The air was different, heavy, suffocating. I didn't belong here, but I had come to reclaim something, my dignity, my justice. I spent the first night in a cheap motel, scrolling through social media, searching for any trace of her. And then finally I found it, a photo. She was smiling, sitting at a dinner table with him, her ex, the man she had replaced me with. The caption read, "With my love, forever." I found her address by accident, or maybe by fate. She had made herself so easy to find, living so boldly as if I had never existed. Like I was just a chapter she had closed, but I wasn't closed, and I wasn't done. The night was cold when I stood outside her apartment, my fingers twitching with the need to knock, to yell, to demand an answer. But I didn't have to, because just as I took a deep breath, the door swung open, and there she was. Her smile faded the moment she saw me. "What are you doing here?" I stepped forward, my voice low. "You never loved me, did you?" Her lips parted, but she didn't speak. And in that silence, I had my answer. She crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. My heart pounded. Then how was it supposed to happen? She sighed, like she was tired of pretending. I needed a way out, she admitted. You were convenient. Convenient. The word punched me in the gut. I clenched my jaw. And the woman you sent to my house? Did you plan that too? Her brows furrowed. What are you talking about? Something inside me froze. She wasn't lying. I could see it in her face. She had no idea, so if she hadn't sent the woman into my life, then who did? I left without another word. My mind raced, trying to piece it all together. My wife had used me, yes, but she hadn't set up the second betrayal. Someone else had. And that meant this wasn't just bad luck. This was orchestrated. The messages, the pregnancy, the way she stayed, refused to leave. It hadn't just been desperation. It had been a plan. But why? I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person I could think of, the woman who had carried my child. She answered on the second ring. Hello? I took a breath. We need to talk. Her voice wavered on the other end of the call. Why are you calling me? I clenched my jaw, my grip tightening on the phone. Cut the act. You played me and I want to know why. Silence. A shaky breath. I don't know what you're talking about. I exhaled sharply, running a hand through my hair. Don't lie to me. You stayed in my house. You made me believe this baby was mine, and now I find out it was all a setup? Who put you up to this? Who sent you to me? She didn't answer immediately, but the silence wasn't empty. It was fearful. My stomach twisted. She was scared, and fear meant there was something bigger at play. Then finally she whispered, You don't want to know. Her words sent a chill through me. My grip on the phone tightened. I don't want riddles, I said coldly. Tell me the truth. She hesitated, but when she finally spoke, her voice was laced with something close to resignation. It was your friend. My breath caught. What? She sniffled on the other end, as if the weight of this truth was suffocating her too. Your best friend. The one who told you it was a great idea to marry a nurse and send her abroad. The one who made you believe it worked for him. My mind exploded. My best friend? The man who had given me the advice that started it all? The one who stood beside me on my wedding day? The one who helped me process my wife's papers? Him? I felt like the ground beneath me had vanished. You're lying. I wish I was. Her voice cracked. But he's the reason I came to you in the first place. I barely remembered driving back to Lagos. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my breath sharp and erratic. It couldn't be true. Not him. Not my best friend, but the puzzle pieces were falling into place too perfectly. The rush to get married, the idea that I should send my wife abroad, the recommendation that I let her friends stay with me. All of it had started with him. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I drove straight to his house, my chest burning with fury. When I banged on his door, he answered like nothing was wrong. Like he hadn't ripped my life apart. Hey man, he said with a grin. Didn't know you were back. I swung before I even knew I was moving. My fist connected with his jaw, sending him stumbling backward. He crashed into the wall, eyes wide in shock. What the hell? Why? My voice was raw, shaking with rage. Why did you do this to me? He wiped his lip, looking at the blood on his fingers. Then, to my disbelief, he laughed. You finally figured it out, huh? The room spun around me. He wasn't even denying it. I clenched my fists, my breath ragged. You destroyed my life. He tilted his head, smirking. I didn't destroy your life, man. You did. I just gave you the push. The room was suffocating, the betrayal thick in the air. Why? I demanded. What did I ever do to you? His smirk faded, his eyes darkening. You had something that wasn't yours. His words sent a bolt of confusion through me. What are you talking about? He scoffed, shaking his head. You really don't get it, do you? He crossed his arms, leaning against the wall like he had all the time in the world. That nurse you married, she was never meant to be yours. My breath hitched. His smile turned cruel. She was mine first. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out. I took a step back, the weight of his words crashing down on me. All this time, my wife had belonged to him first? He shrugged. She was supposed to go abroad for me. But you were so eager, so desperate, so easy to manipulate. I couldn't breathe. My hands shook. So you set me up? His smile widened. I took back what was mine. I lunged at him. I don't know what I was trying to do. Kill him? Hurt him? Make him feel even an ounce of the pain he caused me? But he dodged, stepping back with ease. Relax, he chuckled. It's already done. You ruined me, I roared, my body trembling. His eyes flashed with something dark. No, he said. You ruined yourself by trusting the wrong people. The realization was suffocating. He had never been my friend. Every conversation, every suggestion, every piece of advice, it had all been a game to him. And I had been his pawn. I staggered back, shaking my head. You're sick, he shrugged. Maybe, but at least I'm not the fool who lost everything. I left without another word. There was nothing left to say. Nothing that could fix this. I had spent years living in a reality that wasn't even mine. I had been a character in his story, and he had written my ending before I ever knew I was part of the plot. I drove aimlessly, my mind drowning in thoughts. My ex-wife, the woman who had carried a child that wasn't mine, the friend who had never been a friend, they had all played me, and now I had nothing left. The thought of revenge clawed at me. But what was the point? They had already won, and I was just a man with a broken past and no future. Days passed, maybe weeks. I lost track of time. I didn't eat, I barely slept. The silence of my apartment was deafening, filled with ghosts I couldn't chase away. My phone buzzed constantly, calls from concerned friends, messages from people who had heard rumors. I ignored them all until one day, a message came through from my ex-wife. Are you okay? I stared at the screen for a long time. Was I okay? I laughed bitterly, tossing the phone onto the bed. No, I was far from okay. I thought about leaving, about disappearing, about going somewhere no one knew me, where I could start over. But what was the point? I had nothing to build from. Then, one night, as I sat on my balcony staring at the empty street below, an idea crept into my mind. I couldn't erase the past, but I could make sure it never happened to anyone else. The woman who had lied to me about the baby answered. Hello, I exhaled slowly. We need to talk. She hesitated. I told you everything. The thing. No, I said. You told me what they wanted you to say. Silence, then finally, meet me tomorrow. And just like that, I knew this wasn't over yet. As I hung up, something settled in my chest. A decision. I had been used, betrayed, broken, but I wasn't dead yet. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to fight back. The game wasn't over. Not yet. I wasn't the same man anymore. The one who had been betrayed, played like a fool, discarded like trash. That man had died the day I learned the truth. What was left in his place was something sharper, harder. A man who had lost everything, but who still had one thing left. The truth. I met her the next day, the woman who had carried a child that was never mine. She sat across from me in a quiet cafe, her hands wrapped around her cup like she needed its warmth to keep from shaking. You came, she murmured. I leaned forward, my voice calm, controlled. You're gonna tell me everything, I said. And this time, you're not going to lie. Her lips trembled. She was afraid. Good. Because I wasn't playing their game anymore. Now, I was flipping the board. She hesitated, then let out a shaky breath. I didn't want to do this to you, she said. I scoffed. And yet you did, she flinched. Your friend, he didn't just want to ruin you. He wanted to own you. My blood ran cold. What? She swallowed hard. He wasn't just playing with your life. He was making sure you had no way out. Her eyes flicked to me, full of guilt. He wanted you trapped. He wanted you broken so you would come crawling back to him for help. A sick realization dawned. He hadn't just wanted my wife. He had wanted to control me. He had set me up, built my downfall, watched me burn, and waited for me to turn to him in desperation. But he had miscalculated. Because I wasn't coming back to him for help, I was coming for revenge. I spent the next few weeks studying everything. His business, his routine, his secrets. He thought I was gone, licking my wounds. He thought I was beaten, but I was watching, waiting. Then I made my first move. A quiet whisper, a rumor spread through the right ears. A single lie planted where it would do the most damage. By the time he realized what was happening, his business was already under investigation, his accounts frozen, his partners questioning his loyalty. He didn't see me coming, not yet. I knew my ex-wife was still in the picture. She had chosen him, stood by him when he betrayed me. But I also knew something else. She didn't know everything. I reached out to her, a simple message, meet me one time, no tricks. She didn't reply for 3 days. Then, finally, where? She looked different when she walked into the small hotel bar where I was waiting. Tired, older, worn down, like the shine of her new life had already begun to dull. She sat across from me, arms crossed. Why am I here? I took a slow sip of my drink. Because you know something's wrong. Her eyes flickered. I leaned in. Did he tell you everything? She exhaled, looking away. What do you mean? I smiled, slow and calculated. Did he tell you about the other women? Her breath hitched. Checkmate. It was too easy. She wanted to believe she had won, that she had traded up. But the moment I planted the seed of doubt, she crumbled. Show me proof, she whispered. I slid my phone across the table. Photos, receipts, names of other women he had played, just like he had played me. Her hands shook as she scrolled. Then she looked up at me. Why are you doing this? I smiled. Because I wanted her to feel what I had felt. I leaned back. Because it's your turn to lose. It started slow. Her doubts, her anger, the way she started questioning him, pushing back. He wasn't used to that. Then it happened. She left him, publicly, messily, loudly, and suddenly the man who had destroyed me was the one standing in the wreckage alone. But I wasn't done, not yet. With his personal life in shambles and his business under fire, it was time for the final blow. I leaked everything. His financial crimes, his betrayals, his secrets. His empire collapsed in a matter of days. His partners abandoned him, his reputation burned to the ground, and finally, when he had nothing left, I sent him a message. I hope it was worth it.
I was still the man who had been betrayed, but I was no longer the fool. I packed my bags and left Lagos behind. No more ghosts. No more games, I was done. But as I walked through the airport, my phone buzzed, Dad. A message from an unknown number. You think it's over, my blood ran cold. Maybe the game wasn't done after all. The message on my phone burned into my mind. You think it's over? I had destroyed the man who betrayed me. I had flipped the game, taken control, and walked away with my revenge. So why did it feel like I was still being watched? Still being played. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. My first thought was that it was him, my ex-best friend.
Maybe he was trying to claw his way back, trying to take a final shot. But no, he had nothing left. He was ruined. He was done. Then who? A second message came through. Meet me one last time. If you really want to know the truth, the address was one I didn't recognize. But one thing was clear. The game wasn't over. I stood outside the location, a run-down warehouse on the outskirts of the city. Something about it felt familiar, like a shadow from my past that I had never noticed until now. The air was thick with tension as I pushed open the rusted metal door. Inside, dim lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The place smelled of dust and old metal. My breath was slow, controlled. I was ready for anything. Then I saw him. An older man sat in the center of the room, his fingers clasped together, his expression unreadable. I froze. I knew that face. But before I could speak, he leaned forward and said something that made my blood turn to ice. I was the one who made her leave you. My heart slammed against my ribs. Why hell are you? The man exhaled like he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. Someone who had to clean up a mistake. I took a slow step forward. What mistake? His lips curled into a small, knowing smile. A slow wave of nausea hit me. Start talking. Now, he leaned back, watching me carefully. Your wife never truly belonged to you. She was meant for something bigger. A different path. I made sure she followed it. I clenched my fists. So you're the one who took her from me. He shook his head. No. I simply put the right pieces in place. Your best friend? He was nothing more than a pawn in a bigger game. My vision blurred. There was something bigger, something beyond all of this. And then, as if sensing my realization, he said the words that shattered everything. Your wife was never meant to be yours because she was always meant to be mine. The room spun. I forced myself to breathe, to think. Mine? I shook my head. You're lying, he smirked. Am I? He reached into his pocket, pulling out a photo. My heart stopped. It was my wife, but not how I remembered her. She was younger, smiling, and standing next to him. I snatched the photo from his hands, my chest burning. What is this? His voice was calm, too calm. Proof that she was never yours to begin with. My hand shook as I gripped the photo. She told me she loved me. He chuckled. She told you what you needed to hear. His eyes gleamed with something dark. And now you're standing in front of me because you finally understand you were never playing the game. You were always just a piece on the board. The weight of his words crashed down on me. Everything I had done, everything I had fought for, it was never mine to win. I had been used, manipulated from the beginning. My best friend, my wife, even the woman who had lied about the baby. They weren't working alone. They were following orders, his orders. I took a deep breath, my body shaking. Why are you telling me this now? His smirk faded. Because now I need you for something else. The air turned ice cold. I wasn't here for answers. I was here because he still had a use for me. And that terrified me more than anything else. I should have walked away. I should have left. But I couldn't. Because for the first time since this all began, I finally saw the full picture. The betrayals, the lies, the manipulations. And I knew one thing. I wasn't a pawn anymore. I leaned forward, matching his gaze. What do you want from me? His lips curled into a slow smile. Now, you're asking the right questions. The game wasn't over. It was just about to begin. I should have walked away. Should have left him sitting there in that rotting warehouse. But I didn't. Because for the first time, I saw the truth, the real truth. I was never a man with bad luck. I was a target. My best friend, my wife, the woman who carried a child that was never mine. They weren't random betrayals. They were part of something bigger. I took a slow breath, forcing my anger into something sharper. What do you want from me? The old man smirked, folding his hands like he had already won. I want you to finish what I started. I tilted my head. And what exactly is that? His eyes darkened. I want you to destroy her. My stomach twisted. Destroy who? His smirk widened. Your wife. A bitter laugh escaped me. She's already gone. She left me. She's happy. What more do you want? His gaze didn't waver. She's not happy. She's not even free. She thinks she's safe, but she's still living in my world. He leaned forward, and I want you to burn it down. I clenched my fist, my pulse hammering. Why? If she was always meant for you, why do you need me? His lips curled into something cold. Because she betrayed me too. A chill ran through my veins. It wasn't just about me anymore. This was bigger than I ever imagined. I leaned back, watching him carefully. Explain. He exhaled, almost amused. She wasn't just my woman. She was my investment. I built her up, sent her away, gave her everything she needed to succeed. My jaw tightened, and his eyes flashed, and then she cut me out, thought she could escape. A slow dread crept through me. This wasn't about love. It was about power. He didn't want me to destroy her because she hurt me. He wanted me to do it because she defied him. Why me? I asked, my voice steady. Why not handle it yourself? His smirk faded. Because she'll see me coming. But you. His gaze sharpened. You're the one she'll never expect. I knew what he was asking. He wanted me to be his weapon. The same way he had used my best friend. The same way he had used her. I stared at him, at the man who had ripped apart my life without ever touching me. He thought I would say yes. He thought I was desperate enough, broken enough to do his dirty work. But I wasn't the same man anymore. I wasn't a pawn. I leaned forward, meeting his gaze. I'll do it. A slow, satisfied smile spread across his face. Smart choice. But what he didn't know was that I was playing my own game now. I wasn't just going after her. I was going after him too. The first step was getting close to her. She had no reason to trust me, no reason to believe I wasn't out for revenge. But that was my advantage, because if she was running from him, she needed an ally. And I would be exactly that. I flew back to the UK, retracing my steps, following the path I had once walked as a broken man. But this time I wasn't looking for closure, I was looking for leverage. I found her faster than expected. She was hiding. That much was clear. And when I knocked on her door, she hesitated before opening it. The moment she saw me, her eyes widened in shock. What the hell are you doing here? I gave her a look she couldn't decipher. We need to talk. She swallowed, stepping back. I have nothing to say to you. I exhaled slowly, stepping inside anyway. Good, then just listen. She crossed her arms, her expression guarded. She was scared, but not of me. Of him. And that's when I knew I was right. She wasn't just my betrayer. She was his victim too. I sat down on her couch, keeping my voice calm. He sent me. Her breath caught. What? I nodded. He wants me to destroy you. Her face drained of color. And for the first time, she looked like the one who had lost everything. She stared at me for a long time, her hands trembling. And what did you say? I met her gaze evenly. I told him yes. Her lips parted in disbelief. Then why are you here? I leaned forward, lowering my voice, because I'm not working for him. I'm working for me. A flicker of understanding crossed her face. I gave her a humorless smile. He thinks he's still controlling the game, but he made a mistake. She swallowed hard. Which is... My voice dropped. He forgot that I learned from my mistakes. We spent the next few nights unraveling the web he had spun. The money, the power, the control he still had over people we didn't even know about. He wasn't just a manipulator. He was a kingmaker. And we had both been as I returned to the old man, acting like I was following his orders, feeding him information, playing my part. But behind the scenes, we were dismantling his empire. One by one, his loyal men started to disappear. His financial accounts started crumbling. His partners grew uneasy, whispers spreading through the ranks. I worked methodically, ensuring each move was invisible, small cuts that at first seemed like coincidences. A minor setback here, a mistransaction there. Nothing obvious. But the best part, he had no idea I was the one pulling the strings. Then one day he called me in. His expression was unreadable. You're doing well, he said, but something isn't adding up. I kept my face blank. What do you mean? His eyes sharpened. Someone is betraying me. My blood ran cold because he was looking right at me. I didn't flinch, didn't blink. Then we have a problem, I said smoothly. Whoever it is, they're making you doubt me. He studied me carefully, but I held his gaze. Years ago, I might have broken under this kind of pressure, but not now. Now I had lived through hell. Now, I was the one holding the blade. After a tense silence, he leaned back. Find out who it is. I exhaled slowly as if relieved. As if I wasn't the one dismantling him from the inside. Consider it done. I walked out of his office, my hand steady. But inside, I knew the clock was ticking. He was getting suspicious, which meant I had to end this soon. The cracks in his empire were widening. I had been careful, but no system is perfect. Someone was talking, and it wasn't me. My ex-wife and I worked through the night, tracing the leaks, trying to figure out who had slipped. If he found out before we did, we were dead. Then finally we found the weak link. One of his trusted men, a lieutenant named Cairo. Cairo had been laundering money for him for years, but he had been keeping a little extra for himself. Small amounts, unnoticeable at first, but now it had snowballed into something too big to hide. I turned to my ex-wife. "We can use this." She nodded, but her face was pale. "What if he finds out first?" I clenched my jaw. "Then we won't have to take him down. He'll burn his own house to the ground." I planted the evidence carefully anonymously. The old man was already paranoid, already looking for a traitor that didn't take much to push him over the edge. The moment he saw Cairo's betrayal, it was over. Rage consumed him. He didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions. Cairo disappeared that same night, and the entire organization fell into chaos. His men started doubting each other. Everyone was looking over their shoulders. And while they were distracted, I took my final shot. I leaked everything. His financial records, his crimes, his hidden accounts. I sent them to the people who mattered, the ones he had spent his life avoiding. Law enforcement rivals, even the people he thought were his allies, and one night he lost everything. The old man realized too late. By the time he knew what was happening, the authorities were already moving. His empire collapsed like a house of cards. I watched from a distance as it all burned. And for the first time in my life, I felt free. I should have left it at that. Should have disappeared, started over. But there was one last thing to do. I waited until he had nowhere left to run, until he was nothing more than a cornered animal. Then I went to see him one last time. He was sitting in a darkened room, his face hollow, his hands shaking. He looked up when I walked in, and for the first time, he looked afraid. I sat across from him, my voice calm. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out?" He exhaled sharply, his lips curling into a weak smile. "So you won." I leaned forward. "No," my voice was ice. "I just took back what was mine. I didn't kill him. I didn't have to." He had already lost his power, his wealth, his influence, everything that made him who he was. Gone. He would spend the rest of his life running, hiding, and that was enough. I stood up, turning to leave, but before I walked out, he spoke one last time. "You'll never escape this life," he murmured. I paused, glancing back. "Watch me." Then I walked away, and for the first time, I was truly free. I didn't look back. Not once. I disappeared, leaving behind the ashes of my old life. I wasn't the man I used to be. I wasn't broken anymore. I had been a fool, a pawn, a victim. But in the end, I became the man who flipped the game. And that was enough.